Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into something called systems thinking. It's a really powerful way for leaders to tackle the kind of messy, complex problems we all face in business today.
So how do we get out of that constant firefighting mode and into a place of real strategic leadership? Well, here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at a huge blind spot that trips up a lot of leaders. Then, we'll introduce a whole new way of seeing your organization. We'll also unpack the hidden engines and brakes that are secretly running the show. And I'll give you a practical guide to put it all to work. And finally, we'll talk about what it actually means to be a systemic leader.
All right, let's kick things off with a feeling I'm pretty sure you know. That frustrating sense that your best laid plans just fizzle out and you're not quite sure why.
I mean, does it ever feel like you're just playing whack-a-mole with problems? You stamp out a fire in the sales department and boom, a new one pops up in operations. It's exhausting, right?
And listen, this isn't just you. It's such a common problem that some people have even called modern leadership a bankrupt art. Why? Because the old rulebooks, well, they're just not working anymore. They don't get to the real root of these big, complicated challenges.
So here's the thing. The core problem usually isn't the people or the individual departments. It's the silos. We get so focused on making sure each piece is working perfectly that we forget to look at how they all connect. We're managing the functions, not the whole system. And that, it turns out, is a really dangerous assumption.
So if fine-tuning the individual parts isn't getting us where we need to go, what's the answer? Well, it takes a pretty big shift in perspective. We have to stop seeing our companies as a collection of pieces and start seeing them as a single, dynamic, living thing.
And this slide just nails that difference. On one side, you have traditional thinking. You take the machine apart, polish every gear, and assume it'll run better. That's called reductionism. But on the other side, you have systems thinking. It's not about the gears themselves, it's about the relationships between the gears. It's about how they all interact to create something bigger. That's holism.
So what exactly is a system? It's basically any group of things where the connections between them are actually more important than the things themselves. As the researcher Russell Ackoff famously said, you could have the best car engine in the world, say from a Rolls-Royce, but if you stick it in a Volkswagen, it's not going to work. The performance isn't in the parts, it's in how the parts interact.
The iceberg model is such a perfect way to picture this. The stuff you see every day, the missed deadline, the customer complaint, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's the content. But the real power, the real drivers are hidden below the water. Just underneath you've got the process, the patterns of behavior. And way down deep you have the structure, the underlying beliefs or systems that cause those patterns. The big insight here? Real lasting change only happens when you work below the waterline.
Okay, so if the real power is hiding in the structure, how on earth do we start to see it? Well, it turns out that pretty much all complex systems are built out of two very simple ideas: engines and brakes.
First up, let's talk about the engines. In systems thinking, we call these reinforcing loops. These things create momentum. Think about a virtuous circle, where a little bit of success leads to more success, which leads to even more. Or a vicious circle, where a small problem just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's all about amplification.
And then, of course, you have the brakes. We call these balancing loops. Their job is to keep things stable. They're always trying to hit a goal or a target, and they resist change. A thermostat is the classic example, right? It works to keep the room at a steady temperature. A budget does the same thing for spending.
Now, I know this slide might look like a crazy spiderweb, but don't worry. The idea is actually pretty simple. All those engines and brakes in your company are created by the day-to-day interactions between people. And as you can see, even simple positive or negative connections, when you multiply them across the whole organization, create this incredibly complex web. That web is your company's structure, and it's what's driving everything. Your job as a leader isn't to understand every single strand, but to find the ones that matter most.
Okay, so this theory is all well and good, but how do you actually use it? How do we make this practical? Well, let's look at a kind of strategic compass that can help you navigate.
The key is to be methodical. This framework gives you a clear, repeatable process. You start at phase A, defining that ideal future you're aiming for. Then you look at where you are right now in phase C. Phase D is all about creating the strategy to close that gap. But, and this is so important, you're constantly getting feedback on how you're doing in phase B and scanning the world around you in phase E. It's not a straight line, it's a continuous learning loop. And this diagram just captures that whole journey perfectly. A leader's job is to take the messy, real-world problems, the concrete world, and step back into the abstract world of thinking and modeling. That's where you map out those feedback loops and find the real leverage points. And once you have a powerful idea, you bring it back into the concrete world to test it out. Then the whole cycle starts again.
So here's where things get really interesting. When you start to use these tools and see the world this way, it doesn't just change your to-do list. It changes you. It fundamentally transforms the kind of leader you are.
I mean, this is a whole new mindset. A systemic leader is calmly active in the middle of chaos because they can see the bigger picture. They're not just managing tasks, they're orchestrating the interactions between teams. They're obsessed with breaking down silos and building collaboration, all because they know that's how you create real value for the customer.
At the end of the day, it's a massive shift. You go from managing people in isolation to leading a complex, interconnected, dynamic system. Your job becomes less about giving orders and more about designing the conditions for success to emerge.
And so I'll leave you with this question to chew on. When you learn to see the whole system, you can start to spot the next big roadblock before it even becomes a problem. So, what's the most important thing holding your organization back that you might not be seeing yet?